Hi there, it's April the 12th and we are continuing in Luke's Gospel, and today we are reading the whole of chapter 15 verses 1 to 32. This is one of the most often referred to and often spoken on passages from Luke. It's the chapter that talks about those things which are lost and are found. The chapter begins with the Pharisees and the scribes complaining that Jesus is hanging around too much with the lowlifes, with the tax collectors and with the sinners. And so Jesus gives three parables. Each of the parables describes something that's lost and is found. The first is the parable of the sheep that is lost, that the shepherd will go after and he'll leave the 99 behind. Then there's the woman who has 10 pieces of silver and one of them is lost. And she doesn't say, oh, well, I've still got 9. But actually, because she values that, she lights a light and she looks through the whole house for it and finds it. And then there's rejoicing. And a mark of both of these stories, the sheep and the silver piece, is the rejoicing that happens. There's a joy when it's found. And then, of course, the third story, which is perhaps the most celebrated and most known, is that of what we call the Prodigal Son. Although actually we might call it the compassionate father, because it says an awful lot about the father and about his character. And the son demands or wants his part of the estate. It actually says of his life, he gives him part of his life, it says of the father, and he allows the son to go off. And he knows perhaps that the son is going to be irresponsible, but he gives the son his choice. And while he's away, of course, the story is so well known. The son wastes everything he has. He ends up in the pigsty, eating the husks that the pigs are feeding from, and then says to himself, my father has hired servants who are in a better situation than I am. I'll go back and ask him to take me on as a servant. And one of the things we notice here as he comes back is that the father is already watching for him. Now, there's an important tradition here, or cultural reference, that we might not be aware of from reading this. But under the old Torah law, there was a provision that if a parent felt that a child was really disobedient and rebellious, then the parents could give him over to the community to be stoned as a sign of his not being godly towards the parent and disobeying the commandment. And the father doesn't want this to happen to the son. And so the father actually, when he sees the younger son coming from a distance, he actually runs to the son. Now, this is something culturally that was not normal. Older people didn't run. It was considered disrespectful. But the father knows that if the son reaches the village and the village sees him coming, that they may well act against him and harm him. And so the father goes to him, says he has compassion on him, he embraces him, and he orders his servants to bring the best of everything for his son. And so the father and the son together go home. There is something in this story, in all these three stories, of homecoming. It's not just about turning away from sin and turning around, but it's about coming home, about something that was lost being restored. In the daily prayer of the Jews, there is one of the blessings that says, Baruch atah Adonai harotzeh b'teshuvah, which means, blessed are you, Lord, who wants return, who wants, and I call it homecoming, who wants turn back, who wants us to come back to him. This is a God who is depicted through Jesus' story as the loving father, the compassionate father. And of course, when the father brings him home, he has the fatted calf killed. There's a party, again, this theme of rejoicing. But the older son is out in the field. This is the son who was left behind. He's been working. He's actually says he's been slaving for the father all these years, and the father's never given him anything. So he resents the homecoming of the son, even though his father has compassion. And so the father brings him in and explains that, look, we have to rejoice, because this son of mine was dead and now he's restored. He's come alive again, is the word that the father uses. And he says that this is a cause for rejoicing. And he's particularly directing this, as we saw at the beginning, to the Pharisees and the scribes who are complaining that these people are being given the space to come home to God. It's so easy when we get used to being in God's kingdom, when we get used to being part of his family, to be not generous in our spirit towards those who are coming in, those who may not be like us, those who are not following the ways we follow. God is loving to all. He values everyone individually, and we need to constantly check our hearts to make sure that we are not being like that older brother, but that we are opening the door and welcoming all who the Father wants to call, whatever their status, whatever their situation. Have a very good April the 12th.